And when you think about managing up and you think about, the next step of your career, think about ways you could help your manager. Are there, projects that you could pick up that would help them? Are there areas where, they could step back and have you dive in so that they could have time to do other things? So think of ways that would help your manager. And that's a good opportunity to get that exposure and to get that trust at the higher level.
Hello, and welcome to Somehow I Manage Product Teams. I'm your host, Naveen Pichandi, and I'm on a quest to have conversations with product leaders to uncover how each of them skillfully wield the art of managing people and products. I'm joined today by Diana Stepner, who is a Chief Product Officer at Chan-Zuckerberg Initiative and has led product leadership roles at SimplePractice, Pearson, Kayak, Razorfish, and Monster.com in the past. Diana also runs a cohort-based course on Maven called Product First Leadership, a topic that we'll talk a lot more about in the episode. So in this episode, we talk about 1, what's unique about the product leadership role, and 2, tactical advice for things a newly minted group product manager can do, like how to organize the team, how to conduct one-on-ones, handle the hard conversations, and even manage your personal career as a product leader. And finally, what are the anti-patterns of product leaders? Let's get into it.
For management, press 5.
If you're really interested, it is called Somehow I Manage.
Hey Diana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm really excited for today.
Same as well. Let's kick it off with your story and your journey to being a product leader.
Yeah, so I think like most product managers, I did not expect to be a product manager. It was not what I started out to be. I was a consultant. I worked at a company that did customer relationship management. It was a startup. I was the bridge between the organization and our clients who were mostly in marketing. And they were amazing, engineers building our product. Our customers knew marketing inside and out, but they started to struggle with our product. They were not engineers. They did not understand the engineering terminology that was in the user interface. And so I kept working with our engineers to help them, understand the difficulties that our customers were facing. And the engineers were like, well, the customer should just get it. It's intuitive. And I'm like, no, they're marketers. They have a certain way of working and the product doesn't reflect that. And so, those conversations continued. And I went and got a degree in human computer interaction. I wanted to understand, the why. What was it that were creating those stumbling blocks? How could I identify, the customer's mental models, their ideal user journeys? How could I do all of that ahead of time so that the product that they were working with didn't feel foreign? It felt just natural. And so I loved the program. It was great. I then interned at Salesforce and I was part of the product team and I was doing user experience research. That was originally what I thought I wanted to do. I loved understanding, people, what made them work, how can I get, feedback that would inform, the product development process. But over, time, I was like, I keep handing all of this insight over to the product managers and the product managers keep running with it. Why can't I just do that? And so I pivoted and became a product manager. And I loved all the cross-functional facets. I loved being able to work with engineering. I loved to be able to work with design and data and, marketing and product marketing and all of the different personalities and bring them together to be able to create a product that customers love. And so that's just what's been, empowering me since then to remain in product and to continue to build my career in product.
And UX researcher to product. That's, I think, the first one on the pod. I love starting off with this question purely because every one of these stories are entirely different from one another. And
Yeah.
I almost want to have a collection of these stories where you eventually have, 100 different stories of 100 different ways of people got into product. And you're now the chief product officer at the Chan and Zuckerberg Initiative. Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit about what you do there?
Yeah, I'm actually the head of product on the education side. And so the Chan-Zuckerberg Initiative has two different facets. One focuses on science and one focuses on education. They're central aspects too. But on the education side, I lead a number of teams that work on what are called point solutions. So they're applications. And so we're, taking ideas from the education space, pain points that people have. We specifically focus on K-12, and then we're experimenting. We're looking to build products that would help address opportunities that others may not be exploring because we're a philanthropy. We have impact as our goal, not necessarily revenue. So that allows us to explore problems in spaces where others may not play because they may not have the revenue return that they need for a commercial business.
And that sounds interesting. So you've been in for-profit organizations building product for, for the intent of making money. And
Yep.
now you're in sort of a nonprofit. Your motivation is the goals or what your outcome is going to be. W-
Yeah.
Do you see any difference in the way that you prioritize your products in, I guess, these two scenarios?
Yeah, it's definitely different from a strategy perspective. So, product folks will be familiar with, strategy stacks. And, for us, the metric that we're aiming towards is impact. And, for other companies, it is typically a thing that drives revenue or drives, some type of retention that then equates to revenue. But for us, it's impact. And so it is, mission driven. It is very much about how can we truly have an impact on people's lives? How can we make their lives better? And I think it's a fascinating question that you ask because I do believe that for profit companies, if you can make your customers' lives better, you will see that benefit in, financial return. But oftentimes people think of, the benefits almost as an afterthought as opposed to the piece that actually could be the trigger for, retention happening and consequently being a revenue driver in its own right.
Got it. Diana, you've spent the last 15 years building products and building product teams, and you teach a course on Maven about people first leadership. And that's the topic, what I want to pick your brain about for this episode. And let's maybe start with breaking down what makes leading product teams different from other forms of managers. Like, why is product leadership kind of a different beast on top of, I guess, general being a manager? Like, your people manager is kind of a general principle by itself, but then I feel like product leadership is its own kind of a piece on top of that. Just curious, break that down
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to your first question that product people have very different backgrounds. A lot of us come from product from different places and reasons and backgrounds. And so you don't have a typical product manager. And so that makes it hard to manage a team because everybody is different. They didn't start out to be, an engineer. They started out typically to be something else and then became a product manager. And so how do you identify those drivers that are usually very different person to person? And there, you can say there is that common, I want to have an impact. I want to be able to make my customers' lives better. But people will do so with a different lens, often based on their background and experience. And so as a product leader, you need to think about what makes each person unique and how can you help them achieve, their goals, what drove them into product management and what brought them to the company. And that is again different typically person by person. And so as a product leader, you need to really think about your people as your products because you want them to have an impact. You want them to grow. You want them to be retained. So, all those metrics that your product managers are focusing on with their products, you essentially translate to apply to them. And how do you ensure that, they continue to show up every day, excited to be, part of the organization, excited to work with each other, excited to work for you? That's the same thing that you think about with customers. But as a product leader, you put that hat on and apply it to your team.
And now, and tactically, when you look at your team, and let's say you have a team of 5 or 10 product managers, are there high level categories that you would kind of categorize them. That way you know, or you can identify what the differences are, and how you would do things differently with different categories of product managers on your team.
Yeah, and it will vary depending on their experience. If someone's a new product manager, they'll have different frames of reference than someone who's been a product manager for a longer period of time. So there are considerations just about, how long they've been a product manager. But from a perspective of like personas, you've typically got, a product manager who is technical. They may have come at product management from an engineering perspective. And so how do you relate? How do you interact with, how do you guide, a technical product manager? You'll have a product manager who is sales focused. They'll be, helping, working along the sales team, often in an enterprise customer or an enterprise organization. And those folks may have come through customer success, or they may have come, from sales into product management, or you'll see people come from product marketing into product management. So they tend to look at things with a sales lens. So how do you work effectively with them? In organizations now, you'll see growth product managers, and they often come from startups where they, just were scrappy and had to figure out, like, how do I get the customer to just try my product? And then how do I get them to stay? And they will then have applied that insight into a growth role, either at, that startup or at another organization. And so they've got that more scrappy, that more, type of grit that you'll see. A lot other folks from growth have come from the analytics side. So you'll see data folks become growth PMs because they've got that background to be able to dive into the numbers and identify those points in the onboarding journey, for example, where if you do a little bit of tweaking, then you actually can increase the number of people that convert. So they'll look at things from, a data and an experimental perspective. And then the other facet is like a startup product manager. They love to do everything. They love to wear 8,000 different hats, and they love to just dive in. And so those folks have a different type of, I want to own everything. I want to be able to coordinate everything. I want to be able to bring everything together. So at a high level, those are, some of the personas that you'll see in the product management space. I think people, depending on the company that they're at, they'll, teeter more towards one persona versus another. But as a product leader, that's the approach I would take, is you try to understand, the background someone has, where and how they came into product, and then be able to get into their head around their motivations, and then be able to work with them, through that lens.
Got it. And one of the most common questions I hear is, I'm a senior product manager. I've been doing this for a while, and I have desire to start leading a product team. I want to manage a product team and take on more ownership. And the jump from a senior product manager to a group product manager is a big jump. And there are entirely new sets of skills that you were never prepared for that you have to learn. And so let's maybe go through sort of an exercise, and let's assume one of the folks who are listening on this call are on that journey and want to get into being a group product manager. Let's start with, what are some pieces of tactical advice that you'd give for a newly minted group product manager? Where should they start? What should they start doing? And let's assume they're now going to be leading a team of 3 product managers. What should they be doing?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is listen. Oftentimes people will want to just dive in and change everything and, establish an entirely new culture. But my first recommendation is always just listen. Learn, talk to your team, talk to them about what they like, what they don't like, things they want to change, what are their goals, what makes them tick. Really listen to the people that are part of your team and understand, where they've been, asking for advice and guidance, or, hitting a wall. Be able to identify those opportunities where you could step in and help them, get through a situation that have been tricky, or, some aspect of their career they've been trying to navigate, and help them so that they understand that you're there to help them. And, that is always the lens that I take, with people first product leadership. You're there to help your team. And I don't like the phrase servant leadership. I think it has the wrong connotation. But I do use the phrase people first product leadership, because as a leader, if you're that new group PM, your team is what you need to think about, and you need to earn their trust, their respect. And by really listening to them and being able to identify how you can help them to make a difference really will help create that bond between you and the rest of your team. And so that's why I always suggest start by listening. And so you schedule one-on-ones, you get to know them, you bring the team together, and it's almost like a retrospective. Like, you guys have been here. Let's think about what's gone well. Let's think about, what we should do differently. Let's think about things, if we could start all over again, we would change. So it's almost like doing a retrospective, but on a people level, to be able to identify those areas where you could, dive in a bit and help, but also it tends to raise up opportunities for you to coach them too. The other piece around that, so again, no product person ever works alone. So you got the stakeholders. Once you've listened to your team, you go out and you start talking and listening to the cross-functional stakeholders. You want to understand how people perceive your team and areas where, the stakeholders feel could be better, or where your team is strong. And so again, you take that lens that you took with your team and apply it to the next layer of individuals that they work with on a frequent basis. And then you can get a great, almost like a matrix of like, what do people say and what does the product people feel? And that can help you identify areas that maybe there's a disconnect that you can help with and smooth over. Maybe there's just different terminology or folks weren't communicating effectively. By having that product team and that cross-functional stakeholder view, you can often identify areas where, again, you can help the product so create better alignment quite quickly. But that's how I would start.
Talking about one-on-ones, are there any formats or of the conversation that you typically recommend? Like, how should you structure your one-on-ones? I ask that because there are very many ways of doing it. There are so many different formats of how people do it. And the, I guess, other question is, I know it's typically recommended to do bi-weekly, but what do you do bi-weekly versus what do you do monthly versus quarterly? When do you start having career conversations? I'm curious if is there some sort of a rule of thumb that you use?
Yeah, and so I tend to do weekly one-on-ones, and that will again depend on the size of team that I'm overseeing. But I do like one-on-ones with my direct reports on a weekly basis because in the product space, things don't stay the same. And so by having that weekly cadence, we're able to, share brains in a sense and have that opportunity to talk about things that appear during the week quite quickly without having to wait, for the next one-on-one. And I realize you can reach out over Slack, you can email, whatever the communication vehicle is of choice. But oftentimes those one-on-ones are just a great opportunity to dive in a little bit more than you would over a Slack, for example. It also helps you to have them again on a weekly basis so that you can get a sense of something that may become a problem even before it's a problem. And so again, that's why I like that weekly cadence. With the folks who don't work for me directly, I will meet with them on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. Again, it depends on the size of the team, but I do like the skip level conversations because I think that also provides really good insight, like a 360 into how the people that work for you are actually being perceived by the people who work for them. And so I will do those again on a monthly or quarterly basis based on the number of skip level individuals that I have. The structure, I've found that it tends to change based on the organization. Some organizations are like, here's my template. You must use my template. Other places are a little bit more free flowing. So I think it's also a little bit on you to be able to decide what's right for you. I do believe that the person that you're meeting with should be responsible for the agenda. The one-on-one is for them. And so I will, put things into the agenda, but I try to keep them short and concise. So a majority of the time is from the person I'm meeting with to talk through what's top of mind for them. I will ask questions, I will weave in things, but I think one-on-one should be the time for the person you're meeting with, not you as the leader. defining the agenda. The way that I like to structure them is, what are your plans? What are you doing in the next week? What's top of mind? I want to know the progress. What is, some of your big initiatives? Where are they tracking towards the goals? What is the progress you've been making? And then the last is the problems. Are there areas that are blockers? Are there things that are just causing you to just, want to scream and that I can help with? And so at a high level, that's the structure that I do. That works really well because that tends to be a similar format that can be used from a product perspective with, company or executive shareouts. When you talk about your product, to the senior leadership team, you often have a format that's similar to here's our plans, here's our progress, here's our problems. And so by using that in our one-on-ones, it just helps people to get into that mindset that they can then just have an easier time transitioning to sharing with leadership in a similar format.
That's great. If we were to now move on to sort of the next step, now I'm a group product manager. I've been here for, let's say, a month or two. I've understood kind of how to get started. I'm doing regular one-on-ones with the team, but now I'm moving more toward I want to create a great environment for these folks to flourish and move up in their career. Now, for someone trying to think of like how do I create a great environment so this team can flourish, get the right opportunities, what are some things that I need to be doing as sort of that newly minted group product manager?
Yeah. And there's a couple different things I would say. One, again, goes back to, the strategy stack of within your organization, you should have, a mission and a vision and a strategy and goals. Then from the product perspective, you define your strategy. What is the strategy as a product organization that you want to have to be able to support the company's direction? And some will use that as, areas that you're going to focus on. Some will use it more in the construct of, principles or tenets that define how we work. Within that, then you define your vision. So where do we want to be in 3 to 5 years? And it may be shorter or longer term, depending on the sector that you're in. But I've really found that visioning exercise to be truly powerful because as product folks, we're in that space of having to think about now, next, and later. And so the vision helps us to determine where we want to get to. And that just helps spark excitement. That helps to spark enthusiasm. It also helps us to understand what it is that we need to do now to be able to get to where we want to be in the future. And so just really from an energizing perspective, working with the team to be able to define, our portion of the strategy stack really creates that alignment and that excitement. And it's often the vision that really kicks people into, I want to achieve this. This is what I want to achieve. This is what I want us to be about. And that's then the rallying cry. And then you're able to define your roadmap and your goals to be able to get to that vision. But that vision tends to be that piece that just energizes everybody and allows them just to have that excitement. But I will say that is business. The thing that I also believe is truly important from a cultural perspective is to have fun. And so if you're just focusing on, the work day in and day out, you're not treating people like a human. Humans, we want to have fun. And so I do think you need to balance that, business with some fun too. And the other way that, I will define fun, it's like, it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay just to be human. It's okay to, share a joke, laugh, do all of those activities that help everybody to get to know each other. So just make sure that you bake in fun inside all of that work so that you truly have that human connection, not just that work meaning that, empowered us to come to the organization in the first place. If that fun isn't there, then the work is just work. You want people to have fun at work too.
That's a great point. And now let's say you have a great camaraderie, you've got a fantastic team who gel well with each other and they love you as sort of a manager. There is there will obviously come a time, say 6 months, 8 months from that point in time, talking about what's the next step in my career? Like, how do I start doing career planning? And let's set my personal career roadmap. And do you have any advice on how to approach that? Like, how do you have those kind of conversations?
Yeah. And again, I'll have variety of answers. A lot of it is, dependent on the company. A lot of companies do have certain structured like performance management. I found a lot of organizations, used to have them on a quarterly basis. Companies seem to now be shifting more to a biannual, but you don't have to wait for those sessions to happen. I do think there's opportunities for doing coaching throughout. And so if, one of your team members is presenting and, they say a lot, for example, instead of waiting for that, quarterly or biannual review, you can ask them, is there, were you nervous? You can talk to them about the context. You were presenting in this scenario, you did, great job presenting, but I did notice that you said, oh, so let's try to figure out a way to practice before your next presentation and work through so that you have a more professional style when you're sharing. And so giving feedback in the moment is really helpful. I'm not sure you want to classify it as a performance review, but it helps give people the context pretty quickly and then be able to relate back so that when that scenario happens again, they have that insight already to be able to call upon. And so when you do those, biannual or quarterly reviews, it's essentially watching how someone reacts to those micro moments of feedback and seeing how they either internalize it and, adapt, or do they get defensive and not take it on board. That becomes more of a summary in that biannual or in that quarterly where you help talk the person through, the growth that you've seen, opportunities where they may have not taken that feedback on board, and also then to coach them into exactly as you said, what's next. In regards to what's next, most companies will have a career ladder. And if they don't have a career ladder, there are a lot, you can find one on the internet for product managers and you can adopt it for your organization, make the appropriate changes. But the career ladder will typically say what you need to do at a high level in order to get promoted. And the conversations that I'll have with folks on my team is that you need to be doing that next level before you get promoted. So it's a little bit of a tricky one for folks to appreciate, but in order to get promoted, you need to show that you're already doing the job that you're about to go into. And so that's a little bit of a tricky thing for folks to understand or appreciate, but I've found that to be pretty consistent in organizations that we want you to show us that you are acting and working in that next level before we put you into that level. So to find opportunities for people to step out of their comfort zone and into that next level as a manager is part of your responsibility.
That's a great point. I think the whole idea is the way that I see it about doing the role before, I guess, you're moved into the role, your title's changed is, I think at that point, you're just showing more signals or giving some evidence that once you're moved to that role, you're capable of handling the responsibilities of that role. Because
Yeah.
some folks can be, I guess, promoted early and then they realize that isn't the best place for them or they end up burning out and things. So I guess it's definitely is mutually beneficial, I think, where
Yeah.
you kind of show that you're fit for that next level of a role. So it's best to show some sort of signal of you trying to do
Yeah.
that and take on those
And
responsibilities early on. It's a great point there. One of the conversations that most managers dread is when you get into those conversations about career planning and then you find out there's a clear mismatch in expectations of like the product manager and the reality of where they stand in terms of how soon they can be promoted. And it's not a fun conversation to have for both of them in that room because obviously there's disappointment on one end and the other end there's I guess uncomfortableness in terms of how you communicate these things.
yeah.
Out of curiosity, like how would you advise someone who is obviously early in their managerial career to have those kind of conversations?
Yeah. And it's, as you said, it's tough when people ask, you like, will I get promoted in a certain period of time? I mean, the answer that I honestly give is I can't tell you because it depends on the person and it depends on how they show up. So I try to help people understand that there isn't a clock ticking. There isn't a set period of time that you need to be in a specific role to get promoted. It's more your actions, your behaviors. Do you show that next level that will determine the timing? I will, caveat that some companies will say you have to be in a role for at least 6 months. You have to be in a role for at least a year. So sometimes there are those guidelines, but I don't think it's right to say it has to happen at a certain time because it's up to, how the person shows up, how they're, demonstrating that next level. And you as a manager, how do you see them changing, adapting, taking on board feedback and their overarching growth? So I don't think there can be a set answer for how long to be in a specific role. It depends on, some aspects of the company and their policies, but a lot of it depends on how the person shows up and that on you as a leader to help them show up in the best way possible.
That's a great point. Now, when I think about, I guess, the aspects that you need to hone in on, there are certain skills and soft skills that you need to practice in the way that you become a good product leader. What are some of the anti patterns that you need to sort of avoid when leading product teams? What are those pitfalls that you need to be aware of that you could fall into? But if you're conscious about it, maybe you can avoid it.
Yeah. And so there are a couple of principles that I would say. Sometimes product folks will come in and see themselves as the CEO. So their anti-pattern is to basically say, because I said so. You must do this because I said so. And I find that an anti-pattern. Again, as a product person, you're working cross-functionally. You should be bringing people together. It should be a foundation built on trust, not because you as the product manager did say, I told you so. You have to do this because I told you so. I don't think that's the right approach. The other anti-pattern that I would see is bullies. Some people are just not nice. And that's not a great characteristic for product people because you're working again across so many different types of people and personalities. You should be representing the customer. And if you're a bully, that again is not a good characteristic. You should be instead looking for collaboration, looking for cohesion, looking for ways to, again, to bring people together to help move quickly to provide that outcome that your product was created to provide. The other thing that I would say is a lot of people in the starting portion of their career, rightly so, will come with a problem and not be sure what to do. But as you progress in your career, I look for people who bring me solutions. They bring me options as opposed to, you're my leader, tell me what to do. So again, as you get more experience and have more insight to call upon, to be able to look for those opportunities to bring solutions or to bring options as opposed to just bringing problems, I think is also very, very key. Another facet around it is, where do they look? Do they just have blinders on and only look at their product? Or the pattern I recommend is, do they look more broadly? Do they look at how their work could actually benefit others? Do they share? Do they, collaborate with other groups? Do they give insight to other teams by sharing research that could be applicable or templates that could help out? So instead of just keeping those blinders on and only thinking about themselves or their team, I look for people who pick their heads up and look and see how their insight could help others, how they could help others. And really, when I see that, I want to encourage it. And then at a foundational level, I look for people who have a growth mindset. They want to learn. They want to be able to continually take on new insight versus folks that are with a fixed mindset and just say, that's the way I've done it before. That's the way I'm going to do it again. And so at a high level, those are some of the characteristics I look for and the anti-patterns to them. I know there would probably be, other lists that people would have, but those are the ones that top of mind resonate with me.
Yeah, that's a great list. Now, if I were to look at the mirror and say, I need to be looking at my own career and look at how I need to grow my career to that next level and set goals. So, what advice would you give for, say, the group product manager, so he or she can set themselves for going up to whatever that next level is in that company? What are things that they need to be doing good to?
I think there are a couple points that come to mind. I'm going to be, honest. We all need help. There's always areas where I, as a leader, could use some help. And when you think about managing up and you think about, the next step of your career, think about ways you could help your manager. Are there, projects that you could pick up that would help them? Are there areas where, they could step back and have you dive in so that they could have time to do other things? So think of ways that would help your manager. And that's a good opportunity to get that exposure and to get that trust at the higher level. I also, again, go back to look across the organization, look outside of your product realm. Where could you help others? Could your research help inform, other teams? Could your insights help, guide a new product manager who's just starting out? Look outside your sphere of influence and see if there are others that you could add value to. And then that often reveals, there may be a hackathon you could work on. There may be, an upcoming all hands that you could help with. There often are group, company-wide activities where you could dive in and really help out, not just yourself, but the company in general or the team in general. And those are great ways to, broaden your sphere of influence, but also show your manager that you're looking for more and you have the capacity to do more.
And that's a great piece of tactical advice, especially the first one, which I've heard it before. Solve your manager's headache, and that's one big step in, I guess, making
Yeah,
sure you're getting ready to the next level in some sense. No, this has
exactly.
been great, Diana. This is, I guess, a great piece of tactical advice. I feel like it'll be very useful for folks listening in who are thinking about, how do you step into my first managerial role coming from an IC. I have a bunch of rapid fire questions.
I'm ready. Go for it.
Fantastic. The first one, your most recent wow moment using a product.
I would mean it's going to sound very trite and I apologize, but I think it's like just ChatGPT. It's
Ah.
as it evolved, just being able to write in, a question and get, amazing insight back. Now I'm using Baird and trying the other ones as well. But I just think from a product perspective, especially when they went from 3.5 to 4, there's a lot of opportunities for doing things differently. So I think that's pretty exciting and cool, but I realize that's probably a common thing that people will say right now.
Yeah, isn't it funny how it now feels like old news when
Yeah.
it's just a few months back, the rage, and it still is pretty amazing. I mean, sometimes the answers that it gives back still surprises me. So
Yeah.
I still think it's a phenomenal piece of tech.
Yeah.
What's the best piece of advice you've received?
To be myself. Yeah. And I think we often go in with a perception of how to be perceived or what is a persona that will be successful. And the best advice I received was to be myself and to be the best, Diana I can be. And so that's what I try to, again, teach others and try to, espouse that be who you are, be true to yourself, but be the best version of you that you can be. And, I always use the phrase superpowers. We all have superpowers and be able to identify what your superpower is. It may mean, going through feedback you have received, asking your colleagues, coworkers, friends, but we're all special. And so be able to identify what that diamond is in you that makes you different from others. And then, yeah, be true to that.
And it's definitely all within your control. Like you control what you end up being or the version of you that you end up being. So that's a great piece of advice. One piece of obsolete tech that you miss.
I still actually use it. When I run, I have a really small iPod Nano.
Oh wow.
And I love it because if I ran with my phone, I would be like, oh my God, I should check my message, or I just got a text or something. But this iPod Nano only plays podcasts. That's pretty much all it does. I can play music on it too, but I can't get messages. I can't surf the internet. I can't, check my email. And I love that. So when I run, I've got my really small little iPod Nano and I love that tech. So I keep buying them on eBay because they do break, but that's my outdated tech that I still use.
Nice, nice. I feel like I do see a lot of people still holding on to their iPods. Keep it another half a decade and then you can sell it as vintage tech, I guess. That's how fast some of these things move. This has
Sure.
been awesome, Diana. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. And for folks who are interested, where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, so I'm at dianastepner.com. You can learn about me there. I'm also on LinkedIn. I post at a Substack as well. And so you'll find a link or a way to sign up on my Substack on dianastepner.com, or just reach out to me over LinkedIn. And that's the best way. Yeah, those are the best ways to connect with me.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'll make sure to link those in the podcast notes as well. And I know you run a Maven course on People First Product Leadership. Is your course coming up? Do you have another one coming up very soon?
Yeah, there's one coming up the week of Halloween. So I'm not saying people have to wear costumes, but yeah, that'll be the next course. So if folks are interested to sign up, please do so. You can find it on Maven or just, sign up to be on the awareness list. If that October timeframe doesn't resonate with you, you got work conflicts, etc., just get on the list to find out when the next one will be held after that.
Fantastic. We'll make sure to have that link in the podcast notes as well. This has been great, Diana. Thank you again so much for joining us today, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been wonderful speaking with you. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks, Diana.